My dad stood up in the middle of my wedding reception and said, "This whole thing is a mistake." Not a whisper. Not a mumble under his breath. Loud. Clear. In front of 231 people who had driven from 3 different states to celebrate me. 231 people who had picked out gifts, booked hotel rooms, ironed their outfits, and showed up with smiles on their faces, and my father chose that exact moment to announce to every single one of them that my marriage was a mistake. The room went silent. Not that awkward party silence where someone drops a glass and everybody laughs a second later. This was the kind of silence that fills your chest and makes it hard to breathe. My husband, Darian, had his hand on my back. I felt his fingers tighten just slightly. The flower girl, my 6-year-old niece Brianna, stopped mid-twirl and looked up at my father with her mouth open. Even the DJ cut the music. And me? I just stood there in my wedding dress, a silk bias-cut gown I had designed myself, every single seam sewn with intention, and I looked at my father, and I smiled. Not because I was okay. Not because it did not hurt. But because I had spent 31 years learning how to hold myself together in front of that man, and I was not about to fall apart on the best day of my life. But here is what my father did not know that night. He did not know that while he was busy deciding how little he thought of me, I had been building something. Quietly. Patiently. The way you build something when you know the whole world is watching you fail and you refuse to give them the satisfaction. My name is Adrian Calloway. And this is the story of how my father tried to take everything from me, and ended up handing me the keys to his world instead. Let me take you back to before the wedding. Before the reception speech that would become the most replayed moment in my extended family's group chat history. Before any of it. If this story has you hooked, you're my kind of people. Comment where you're watching from and subscribe for more. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, in a house where my father, Reginald Calloway, was the son and everyone else was just trying not to get burned. My dad was a successful commercial real estate developer. He built strip malls, office parks, a couple of boutique hotels. He had the handshake of a man who expected the room to rearrange itself around him, and more often than not it did. He was brilliant, I will give him that. But brilliance without humility is just arrogance in an expensive suit. My mother, Denise, was soft where he was hard. She loved him the way some people love weather. She did not always understand it, she did not always like it, but she had learned to dress for it. My older sister Tatum had figured out early that the best way to survive my father was to agree with him on everything, and then do whatever she wanted when he was not looking. Smart, in its own way. But not my style. I was the one who asked questions. The one who pushed back. The one who, at 13 years old, sat at the dinner table and told my father that his argument about women in business did not hold up historically. He looked at me like I had just thrown a cup of water in his face. And he never quite forgave me for it. By the time I was 23, I had finished a fashion design degree from Savannah College of Art and Design, moved to New York with $4,000 and a rolling rack of samples, and started my brand. I called it Calloway Atelier. Not to impress my father. Not to carry his name. But because it was mine, and I wanted the world to know exactly where I came from and exactly what I had done with it. The first 2 years were brutal. I was sleeping on a futon in a studio apartment in Crown Heights, eating dollar ramen and building a website at 2 in the morning. I made exactly enough money to keep the lights on and the fabric bolts coming in. But I was moving. Slow but moving. My father called maybe once a month in those years. The conversations always followed the same script. "How is the sewing thing going?" he would ask. Not fashion. Not the brand. The sewing thing. "It is going well," I would say. "You know there is still time to pivot. Get your real estate license. Come work with me." "I am good, Dad. Thank you." And then a silence that cost more than words. "Then, your sister just closed a deal on a commercial property. Did she tell you?" He always ended with Tatum. Like she was the punctuation mark on everything I was not. Now, I want to be fair. Tatum is genuinely talented. She did go into real estate with our father, and she was good at it. But there is a difference between being good at something and being propped up by someone who has spent decades building the table you are now sitting at. My father had opened every single door for Tatum. He had introduced her to every client, co-signed every loan, put her name on every deal he could legally put it on. And then he turned around and pointed at her as evidence that the women in his family could succeed, as long as they did it his way. I was doing it my way. And that was the problem. When Darian and I got engaged, I genuinely believed my father would come around. Darian Osei is a good man. An architect. Steady, thoughtful, the kind of person who remembers what you said 3 conversations ago and still checks in about it. He had met my father twice before the engagement, and both times had been polite and measured even when my father was neither of those things. I thought naively that maybe a wedding would be the thing that softened the edges between us. I was wrong. The morning of the wedding, my father showed up at the venue before any of the other guests. I was still in the bridal suite, getting my makeup done, when my maid of honor, Priya, came in and told me he was downstairs asking to speak with me alone. I should have known then. But I went. He was standing in the venue lobby in his suit, holding his hat in both hands, and for just a second I thought, this is it. This is the moment he tells me he is proud of me. Adrian, he said, you do not have to do this. I blinked. Do what? This. He gestured vaguely upward, toward the ceremony space above us. This whole thing. Darian is a nice enough young man, but you are making a decision based on emotion. You always have. And emotion is not a foundation. I stood very still. Dad. My wedding starts in 2 hours. I know. That is why I am saying this now. Before it is too late to walk away without too much embarrassment. I looked at my father for a long moment. I thought about everything I could say. Every argument I could make. Every version of this conversation I had rehearsed in my head over the years. And instead I just said, I will see you out there. And I walked back upstairs. He sat in the front row during the ceremony, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Darian and I exchanged our vows. I cried. Darian cried. Priya cried so hard she smeared mascara across the back of her hand trying to wipe it away. It was beautiful and real and everything I had wanted. And then we got to the reception. We were midway through dinner when my father stood up. He had not been asked to speak. There was no microphone. He just pushed back his chair, stood up to his full height, and started talking in that voice he reserved for boardrooms and arguments he intended to win. I want to say something, he said. About this marriage. About this situation. The room went quiet. I looked at Darian. He looked at me. My daughter is a talented girl, my father continued. Always has been. But she has a habit of choosing feeling over function. And I think, and I say this with love, that today is another example of that. She has been running a little fashion business for years now. She has been living in New York doing whatever it is she does. And now she has decided to marry a man she has known for 3 years, in a dress she made herself, at a wedding that, he paused. He actually paused and looked around the room like he was searching for the right word. That reflects her priorities. Someone coughed. My Aunt Geraldine whispered something to the person next to her. My cousin Brent stared at the tablecloth. I just think my father said that this whole thing is a mistake. And there it was. I put my fork down very carefully. I felt Darian's hand on my back, and I heard Priya inhale sharply somewhere behind me. My mother reached over and put her hand on my father's arm, and he sat back down like he had not just detonated something in the middle of the room. The DJ put the music back on after about 15 seconds. People started talking again, slowly, cautiously, the way people talk when they are trying to pretend something did not happen. My father ate his meal. My mother looked at me across the table with an expression I had seen 1,000 times, apologetic, helpless, like she was sorry for the rain but could not stop it. I danced with my husband. I cut the cake. I smiled in every photograph. And when people came up to me privately and squeezed my hand and said things like "do not let him get to you," and "he does not know what he is talking about," I thanked them graciously and kept moving, because standing still felt like letting him win. But inside I was not just hurt. I was done. Done waiting for something from him that was never going to come. Done making myself smaller so he would not feel threatened. Done. I did not call my father for 6 weeks after the wedding. When he finally called me, I let it go to voicemail. His message was 3 sentences long. Adrian, it is your father. I hope you are settling in. Give me a call when you can. No apology. No acknowledgement of what had happened. Just, call me when you can. Like nothing had occurred. Like he had just said something mildly awkward at a dinner party and we all needed a little time to move past it. I did not call back. Tatum texted me the following week. Dad feels bad, she wrote. You should reach out. I stared at that text for a solid minute. Then I put my phone face down on my desk and went back to work. And I stayed there. In my work. Because something had shifted in me the night of that wedding. Something had clarified. All those years of hoping my father would look at what I was building and see it for what it actually was, that hope was gone now. And without it taking up space in my chest, there was so much more room for everything else. I had been operating Callaway Atelier with a small but loyal team, my production manager, a woman named Solvii who had been with me since year 2, a senior designer named Knox, and a rotating roster of interns who were always more talented than I had any right to expect. We had a showroom in the garment district, a website that was finally doing the kind of traffic that made ad buyers interested, and a waiting list for custom pieces that was longer than I had anticipated when I first started building it. But I had been holding back. Playing it safe. Pricing conservatively, taking on fewer wholesale accounts than we could handle, turning down press opportunities because I was worried about scaling too fast and losing the quality that made us worth talking about in the first place. After the wedding, I stopped holding back. The first move was the collection. I had been sitting on a capsule line for 8 months, refining it, second-guessing it, asking Knox to revise the draping on the lead piece for the 4th time. I stopped second-guessing and I submitted it to a buyer at Nordstrom who had reached out to us twice the previous year. She called me within 48 hours. We want to carry the whole capsule, she said. And we want first right of refusal on your next drop. I said yes to both. The second move was the editorial. A senior editor at a major fashion publication had been following our Instagram for months and reached out wanting to do a profile. I had been putting it off. I said yes. The story ran 6 weeks later with a full spread. The headline was something about quiet luxury and the designers redefining it. Our website crashed the day the issue went live. We had to add 3 new servers over a weekend. The third move was the one nobody saw coming. About 4 months after the wedding, I got a call from a business contact of mine named Waverly Chun, who worked in commercial real estate acquisition. We had met years earlier at a networking event and stayed loosely in touch. Waverly told me that a boutique hotel property in Midtown Atlanta was going into receivership. The owner had over-leveraged, the numbers had collapsed, and the property was being sold at significantly below market value. She thought I might be interested. Now, I want to be clear about something. I was not a real estate person. That was my father's world, not mine. But here's what I knew. That hotel had been acquired originally by my father 12 years earlier as part of a larger portfolio deal. He had sold it to the current owner 4 years ago but had retained a consultancy agreement and a first right of refusal clause on any future sale. A clause that, according to the paperwork Waverly sent over, had a 30-day window to exercise. A 30-day window that my father, as far as Waverly could tell, had not moved on. Either he did not know the sale was happening, or he had decided the price was not right, or something had fallen through in his pipeline. I talked to Darian about it that night. We sat at the kitchen table with the documents spread between us and 2 cups of tea going cold. Do you know what you are doing? Darian asked me. Not skeptically. Just honestly. Not entirely, I said. But I know an opportunity when I see one. This is going to be a whole thing, he said. I know. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he picked up his tea. Then let us make sure it is worth it. I spent the next 3 weeks moving fast and smart. I brought in a real estate attorney. I ran the numbers with Waverley. I leveraged a part of the business equity I had been building in Callaway Atelier against the acquisition financing. It was not a small risk. But the valuation on the brand had grown significantly since the Nordstrom deal, and the lender we worked with understood what we were building. We closed on the hotel on a Thursday morning in February, 8 months after my wedding. I did not tell my father. I did not tell Tatum. I did not tell my mother, even though she and I had started talking more regularly again. I just held it. Quietly. The way I had been holding everything for years. Meanwhile, the brand kept climbing. A celebrity stylist put one of our pieces on her client for a major awards show. The photo went everywhere. My inbox became something I needed a full-time assistant to manage. Knox was promoted to creative director. We hired 2 more production staff. We started conversations with a luxury retailer in London about international distribution. My father heard about it. Of course he did. Atlanta is a big city that moves like a small town when you run in certain circles, and my father ran in those circles. People he knew started mentioning my name, showing him press clips, asking if he had seen what his daughter was doing. Tatum texted me again around this time. Heard the brand is doing well, she wrote. Congratulations. Then 2 minutes later, Dad has been asking about you. I sent back a single heart emoji and kept working. What I did not know, what I found out later, was that my father had started doing his own research. He had pulled up the Callaway Atelier website. He had read the profile. He had seen the sales numbers that had leaked into a trade publication. And he had started asking around about my finances, the way he asked around about everything, through channels and contacts and people who owed him favors. At some point in that research, someone told him about the hotel. I do not know the exact moment it landed for him. I like to imagine it happened on a morning when he was at his desk with his coffee, in that big leather chair in his home office that he had always kept like a throne room. I like to imagine the exact second the name of the property appeared in whatever document or conversation made it real for him, and that he sat back in that chair and understood, maybe for the first time, that the daughter he had been dismissing his entire life had just walked quietly into the middle of his world. He called a family meeting. Not a phone call. Not a text. A family meeting. Formal notice sent to me, Tatum, and my mother, requesting our presence at the family home on a Sunday afternoon 2 weeks from the date of the message. I read that message 3 times. Darian was standing behind me when I read it. Are you going? He asked. Yes, I said. Do you want me to come with you? I thought about it. No. I need to do this one alone. I drove to my parents' house in Buckhead on a Sunday in late spring with my windows down and a podcast playing low. I had on a dress from our new collection, a deep green wrap with a structured shoulder that Knox had pushed me toward when I kept defaulting to something safer. He was right. I was always learning to trust the people around me a little more than I trusted my instincts to play small. My parents' driveway had Tatum's car in it already when I arrived. I parked, sat in my car for a minute, then got out. My mother answered the door. She held me for a long moment before she let me inside. She smelled like the same perfume she had worn my entire life. And I let myself just be her daughter for a few seconds before I walked into the dining room where my father was already seated at the head of the table. Tatum was to his left. She gave me a look I could not entirely decode, part sympathy, part something more complicated. I sat down across from her. My father looked older than I remembered. Not diminished, exactly. But there was something in his expression I had not seen before. An awareness. Like a man who had walked into a room expecting the furniture to be one way and found it had been rearranged while he was not looking. Thank you for coming, he said. Of course, I said. He folded his hands on the table. I have been doing some thinking. Okay, I said. About the business. He paused. He was not a man who paused often, which told me everything I needed to know about how much this was costing him. About the hotel acquisition. I waited. You executed a purchase on a property that I had first right of refusal on, he said. I want to understand how that happened. The window was 30 days, I said. You did not exercise it. I did. I was in the middle of, he stopped. Restarted. My pipeline was complicated at that quarter. I was not aware the sale was moving as quickly as it was. That is what the 30-day window is for, I said. To be aware. Tatum shifted in her seat. My mother, sitting at the other end of the table, kept her hands folded and her eyes forward. The brand, my father said. I have been reading about it. I know, I said. The Nordstrom deal. The London conversations. He exhaled through his nose. The valuation. Yes. Adrian. He said my name the way he always had, fully, like a formal address. What are you doing with the hotel? I am converting part of the ground floor retail into a flagship showroom for Callaway Atelier, I said. The upper floors will remain hotel accommodations. The repositioning makes financial sense for both revenue streams. We have a hospitality consultant and a brand strategy firm already engaged. The silence in the room was different from the one at my wedding. That one had been shock. This one was something more like recalibration. You planned this, my father said. It was not quite an accusation. It was not quite a compliment. I planned the brand, I said. The hotel was an opportunity one moved on when it presented itself. You taught me to move on opportunities, actually. You said that in an interview once. I read it when I was 14. Something moved across his face. I did not look away from it. Tatum spoke for the first time. Adrian, Dad just wants to understand. I know what he wants to understand, I said, not unkindly. He wants to understand how this happened without him knowing. He wants to understand how I built something significant enough that it now intersects with his world. And he wants to know whether I am going to be a problem for him, or whether we can all move forward like a family. I looked at my father. Am I right? He did not answer immediately. Then slowly, he nodded. I do not want to be a problem for you, I said. I have never wanted that. What I have wanted my entire life is for you to see what I am actually capable of. Not what you assumed I was capable of. What I actually am. My father was quiet for a long time. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. A car passed on the street outside. Your wedding, he finally said. What I said. Yes. He pressed his lips together. I should not have said that. It was the closest he had ever come. And we both knew it. I held it for a moment, turning it over in my hands like something delicate. No, I said. You should not have. He stopped again. My father, who had an answer for everything, did not have one for this. I was scared, he said. And the word came out like it cost him something real. I looked at him across the table. This man who had shaped the negative space of my ambition for 30 years. Who had never once thought to ask me what I was building, only to doubt that it was worth building. Who had stood up at my wedding in front of 231 people and announced that my life was a mistake. And who was sitting here now, across from me, finally seeing me. I know, I said quietly. I did not tell him everything was forgiven, because it was not. Not yet. Maybe not ever entirely. There are wounds that heal and wounds that just scar, and you learn to know the difference. But I told him the truth, which is that I was not interested in carrying the weight of his fear anymore. That I had put it down, somewhere around the 8-month mark after the wedding, and I had no intention of picking it back up. We talked for 2 more hours. About the hotel, about the brand, about what a professional relationship between us might or might not look like going forward. Tatum, to her credit, mostly listened. My mother refilled the water glasses twice and did not say a single thing she would regret. When I left that afternoon, I sat in my car in their driveway for just a moment before I started the engine. I called Darian. How did it go? He asked. Better than I expected, I said. And exactly how I thought it would. Are you okay? I looked at my parents' house through the windshield. The oak tree my father had planted in the front yard the year I was born was enormous now. It had not been that big the last time I really looked at it. I am good, I said. And I meant it. Here's what nobody tells you about building something real. It is not just about the revenue, or the press, or the moment when someone powerful finally has to acknowledge that you exist on your terms and not theirs. It is about who you become in the process. The version of yourself that shows up every morning and makes one good decision, then another, until one day you look around and realize you are standing in the middle of a life that you built deliberately, and it looks exactly like what you imagined when you were 23 years old and sleeping on a futon in Brooklyn and refusing to stop. My father ruined my wedding. He stood up in front of everyone I loved and told them my choices were a mistake. And it hurt in a way I will probably carry for the rest of my life, the way you carry the first real betrayal from someone who was supposed to be safe. But here's what he did not know when he sat back down that night and picked up his fork. He did not have the last word. He never did. I did. Callaway Atelier is currently valued at a number that would have made 23-year-old me faint on her futon. The flagship showroom in the hotel opens in the fall. Knox is already working on the collection we will debut there. Darian and I bought a house last year with a garden that I have absolutely no idea how to maintain, and I love it completely. My father and I talk on the phone about once a month now. The conversations are different than they used to be. He asks about the brand by name. He says Callaway Atelier like it is something real, because it is, and because he finally understands that it was always real, even when he was not looking. I do not need his approval. I stopped needing it a long time ago, somewhere between the wedding and the hotel acquisition and the 10,000 mornings in between where I just kept going. But I will be honest with you, it does not feel bad to have it.